what are we doing financially? What are we doing spiritually? What are we doing mentally to have our houses in order? If you're a spiritual individual, how's your testimony? How strong is it? Is it going to be easily shaken? How's your emotional intelligence? If you have to deal with a teenager that you haven't had to deal with yet, are you ready for that? Do you have your own emotional house in order that you can now be in a position to deal with difficulty in life? Are you in a position to deal with a death of a loved one? Sean, it's good, brother.
Good morning.
Thinking about doing the AMA with you this week. I was thinking about it over the weekend. I'm like, oh, it'd be great to chat with Sean. You guys would assume that I get to have conversation with Sean on a regular basis, but the reality of it is, if it wasn't for the podcast, I'm not even sure if we would ever talk, which is kind of sad, actually.
It is.
It's good to have you on, man. How you doing?
Great. It's good to be on. Life is good. Just I gauge things being really good by how nonstop it is. I tend to like to be in that situation, but effective and productive at the same time. And when it's like that, I tend to lean more towards, instead of focusing on the stress of it, the memories being built and what's being accomplished and the positive aspects that are coming from it. And so life is good.
And we were talking about this before we hit record. I'm the complete opposite. Nothing's ever good enough. There's always things to be done. And I'm highly ungrateful for everything. And there's lots of things that need to be accomplished. And when they're all done, Sean, then I'll be grateful. And usually I'm starting to realize that that's never going to happen, and I'm just going to die. Which, but that's why I need to make some adjustments.
That's why these conversations are good, right? And just being in those environments that gives us those reminders.
Yeah, perspective and everything else. So let's hop into headlines before we get started. As you guys know, we're doing the Ask Me Anything. We're going to field questions today from the Iron Council, our exclusive brotherhood. And I don't know, over the last couple of months, we've started kind of just doing topics, right? That are on the top of our minds to kind of kick us off. What we call headlines, but we pulled headline items as well as just, I don't know, soapbox items that we want to talk about as part of the podcast. But Sean, you had something you want to kick us off?
Yeah. And something that everybody thinks about, but nobody talks too much about, and that's the stock market. It just getting hammered. And, you look at they pronounce it the Nikkei index in Japan, took its biggest hit since Black Monday in 1986. Its largest single day hit, it was like 12.5% or something. It just got hammered. And then global markets are down, the Nasdaq's down, the Dow, everything is just getting annihilated. And this is pre-election. It hasn't even happened yet, and we're already here. Just massive sell-off all over the place. The job markets are down. Companies just aren't hiring. So there's all these factors in it. Totally. And so I just thought I'd bring it up because, people are thinking about it and worried, and maybe we could just talk to that a little bit to give some assurance that the end of the world is not this week.
And Warren Buffett, from my understanding, is like stockpiling cash.
Oh yeah, he just sold half of their holdings in Apple.
Yeah. So what's your takeaway, man? Like how do you know this, learn this, and go, no big deal, or is this important to you? Like what's your pivots based upon this?
I honestly don't have any when this is happening. I just stay the course because our habits are so in tune with long term.
Yeah.
And so we just stay the course. And that was kind of my take on this and in helping ease people's minds. If your habits are good and you're doing the right things with dollar cost averaging and diversification, and if all of your eggs are in one basket and sitting in one place right now, you'd be losing your mind. You
Yeah.
just have a couple holdings and you've kind of sunk everything into it. And I mean, it could be scary, or if you're trying to time it necessarily, but if you just, I mean, I'd look at everything, all of my holdings and all the stuff that I have and all the things I do. I mean, we have a lot of hedges against a lot of downturn. But even in the stuff that's volatile, we have stuff going into it every month and it's consistent. And while it's down, we're going to be buying up a lot more shares and eventually it's going to come up and we'll be fine. But we were taught that. I mean, I was taught that 25 years ago and started doing it. And so this really doesn't worry me. And because I started 25 years ago, this is the fourth time. Well, I shouldn't say the fourth time yet, but it looks like it's going to be. It looks like we're going to enter into another recessionary period. And so this will be the fourth one I've been through in 25 years. And honestly, when these times come, I just keep getting wealthier. But it's having good habits, staying the course, not getting too emotionally wrapped up in trying to time everything with what's happening around us right now. And if you have those fundamentals, you can be okay. And oddly enough, I attach it to the book Atomic Habits, where financially most people have such bad habits and they do so many of the wrong things that they haven't cut out, that it's just a matter of getting rid of those things that don't serve you and replacing them with the things that benefit you and staying that course.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, if you don't mind me just spreading it outside of what you just said and making it a little bit more transcendent to other areas of our lives, I think it's really similar to our health, right? There's a big difference between being overweight, out of shape, bad habits around what I eat, and then finding out you have cancer.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, right? Like you're already on a projection that's going to make it way worse. Sugar's amplifying the spread, all these other things, because you didn't have your shit together.
Yeah, and if it's not cancer, it's going to be something. It's going to be diabetes.
Yeah,
it's going to be high blood pressure. It's going to be
exactly
right.
But if you had some good habits and prepped, you were taking care of your body and eating healthy, and then that showed up, your chances of weathering that storm is way higher if your house is in order.
Yes.
And so maybe that's the call out that I'm hearing too, is like, what are we doing financially? What are we doing spiritually? What are we doing mentally to have our houses in order? If you're a spiritual individual, how's your testimony? How strong is it? Is it going to be easily shaken? How's your emotional intelligence? If you have to deal with a teenager that you haven't had to deal with yet, are you ready for that? Do you have your own emotional house in order that you can now be in a position to deal with difficulty in life? Are you in a position to deal with a death of a loved one because you have you have strong mental fortitude and you have things worked out in your own mind? No, you don't. Then you're not ready. You're not ready for a financial downturn. You're not ready for hardship. You're not ready for physical elements or spiritual battles if we're not taking care of and being sovereign and owning our worlds, right? And that's kind of what I'm hearing, at least on the financial side, from what you're saying is, well, we got to be ready.
Right? And that's why I wanted to connect it to your habits, because again, it is transcendent with everything that you do. And if you don't know what those habits are that are going to give you your best chances, then find out, reach out, start asking questions from people that know.
Totally, man. Dude, so important. So headline for me, it's funny, and maybe we'll talk about the boxer anyway, just because it's like the elephant in the room. But originally I wasn't going to go that direction. I was going to talk about Venezuela, like
that's a good
craziness.
One too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like craziness. And maybe I don't have a call out, or I have a thought that's related, but it's a little bit more applicable to all of us. But if you're not being connected and knowing what's going on there, you should, in my opinion. That is a really big deal. They just had their elections, and from the sounds of it, like you had the typical, the opposing party was winning in the polls, and then like overnight, the current president all of a sudden got all these votes and won.
Yeah.
And there's riots across the country. Many people feel that it was stolen. I believe, if I understand correctly, and I don't even know all the names, but like the opposing candidate is like got kidnapped at one point. I don't know if he's missing, but not good, right? Not good at all. And what's also interesting, and not to make everything about America, but I was looking into this, Sean, and I didn't know this. I find this fascinating. So guess how much meddling, like messing with the elections, the US and the CIA has played in South America?
Oh, I bet it's significant.
Almost every country we've had our hands in the mix.
Yeah.
It is gnarly. And there's evidence now coming out around a major oil reserve in Venezuela, right? Like, dude, like it looks sketchy as all hell. And I'm not saying it's one thing or the other. I'm just saying, like, be aware, at least. Let's think critically, and just be aware of those surroundings of what's going on down there. It's crazy. It's so crazy. And then what I really wanted to get into is, how do we get to this, right? How does Venezuela get into this mindset of a little bit of a communist dictator, communist approach to things? And then we start looking at America, and we have people, I brought this up a couple of weeks ago. We have people marching in America with communist flags promoting communism.
Mm.
And we have governments that are all about rescuing you. We will certainly do. We'll burn through tax dollars. We'll print money if we have to. We'll save you. Don't you worry. And people wanting to be saved. And I'm using those terms particularly because there's this concept of a victim and a rescuer. And it is human nature for us to be a victim. So let me illustrate a couple things. So what does a victim, what's the benefits? Why do we want to be a victim? Because it lacks accountability and responsibility. That's why.
Yeah, it's easy.
If you're a victim, it's easier. If it goes well, it's because of my great, wonderful president. And most people won't do that, though. If it goes well, they'll be like, oh, it's because of me. And if it doesn't go well, it's not my fault, right? It's absolutely someone else's. So I don't take responsibility for things. And I'll give over my sovereignty, my power, over to other individuals for the sake of not taking on the full mantle of ownership of my life. So it's an easy pass. Human nature, we will do it. Watch your kids naturally step into victimhood. Look at work. When things go wrong, do people raise their hand and go, hey, you know what? I contributed to that? No. People go, I did my part. The problem is over here. I got a bad boss, bad company. I have this bad coworker. Those are all blaming. And usually when we blame, you're actually saying they're more responsible than you are. Said another way, you have no power. And you're giving your power over to someone else. That's the victim mindset. And here's the rub. There are plenty of people in this world that will step into being a rescuer for you. They'll go, oh, you know what? I'm mighty all kip. I can save you because it strokes my ego. I'll do this for you. You need me. I need to be needed, right? And we will inject ourselves and perpetuate the rescuer. But here's the rub. A rescuer ultimately doesn't value another person's capacity. If you're rescuing someone, it's because you don't value them well enough. You don't believe they can do it. So be mindful. When your government says, I'll rescue you, what they're really saying is, I don't believe you can do it. And you will perpetuate people being in a victim mindset when they think they can't do it and they need you because they never learned. They don't challenge, right? Like I used to always use this joke, like if we all wanted what's best for our kids, we'd probably all move out of our cush lives. We'd all like get farms and raise our kids on a farm. Why? Because it's in the growth and the challenge of that they would probably build better, stronger character than being pandered to. So be careful what you ask for. Go ahead, Sean.
That the word you just used is what I was going to say. I almost got to the point where I said, I disagree with you, Kip, until you added that part to it. Because when I think of the rescuers, I don't think of them as rescuing. And as a matter of fact, I think most of them know they can't rescue or save whoever they're trying to save. And so they are just pandering. So for me, that's the word that stuck out in what you said, is that even if their intention is good, they know deep down they don't have the capacity to save you. And so you get pandered to by people, even if they have good intention, it's not viable. And so we're being pandered to. And somehow we get fooled over and over and over again, expecting that we're going to be saved when the people that are telling us they can save us don't even have the capacity to it. And most of the time they know it, regardless of their intention. So I'm not going to go full tinfoil hat, like there's some conspiracy and they're against you and they know they can't save you or help you, but it's all pandering. And so if we understand that, then we also understand that there's something we need to do and not keep waiting for Superman to show up and save us.
Totally. And I like what you just wrapped up. That's the ultimate sign. If you're listening to us, you're like, well, that's maybe not me, or maybe it is, or I don't know, maybe you're too ignorant to even consider or be self-aware enough to actually consider this. But the phrase I always use is, if there's any area of your life where you are waiting and hoping, you are being a victim.
Well,
you're waiting and hoping that someone else is going to do something and you're not taking action. So use that as maybe the flag. What area am I waiting and hoping? Am I waiting for my marriage to be great? I'm hoping my wife will do something before I do something. Then you're not making it happen. You're not saying, hey, this is important, I'm going to find a way, and driving it forward. You're not owning it. And so I would look for areas where you're blaming others, right? Or you're waiting and hoping for a solution. What were you going to say, Sean?
Well, I was going to say, in the case of Venezuela, there's another, like, I have a really good friend who's from Venezuela, and he's told me for, a couple decades, the issues that they have there in their government and everything else, and how much he just loves being an American citizen and not being there anymore. But obviously he has family there, and extended family, and his wife's family is there. And all of this, which is hard for him to manage. But one of the things that he told me a while ago is about 10 years ago, and this, not to try and connect this to gun issues and things like that, but that's what happened about 10 years ago, is they banned the ability to get new firearm licenses in Venezuela. And about 6 years ago, they had a giant confiscation where I think they confiscated something like 15,000 firearms in Venezuela. And so now here we are with this tampered, quote unquote, election. And you were talking about riots and things like that. And, but they're rioting with what? They're rioting with hands tied.
And so, who's controlling the police?
Yeah. And so I think what you said, in at least having an understanding of what's going on in these other places, well, that just happened there. Well, what if that happens here? And I've felt this tension. I'm glad you brought this up, because I felt this tension already with that Kamala now being the running person, which, by the way, no one voted for. And now she's running, and they're thinking like, wow, she might have a chance at winning, where literally a couple of weeks ago when Trump was shot, they said, well, it's wrapped up. Zero chance now for the Democrats. And now people are saying maybe there's chance. And so in a week, it can go from zero chance to maybe a chance. It feels like they're already kind of manipulating this thing. So what if there's a manipulation? What if it doesn't go the way that our country, the majority of our country, wants? What if we start rioting? And the difference here is we're loaded with firearms. And so then what? What happens? And so we're talking about getting our house in order when we were talking about the stock market, I think, and not to try and be
Yeah.
fear mongering or anything like that, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I think it's just important that we pay attention and that we start just making sure that fundamentally we're sound in different areas of our lives, so that if these things do happen, we don't have to get caught up in a sense that, now maybe our family is at risk in any capacity if we're just not ready for maybe the worst happening, is what I'm
Totally.
saying.
Well, and here's the perfect segue. Well, I wanted to get the boxer in, and this is a perfect segue. We don't know, right? Like I find knowledge interesting, and I'm not saying anything, right? Around moon landing, for instance, right? But people will be like, I know that. They'll go, oh, I know we landed on the moon. How do you know? Well, I watched a video, or I was told. That's not knowing. That's not knowing at all. That's you regurgitating what you've heard. So in this space of like, be critically think. There's not enough critical thinking happening, and people regurgitate knowledge as their own. And so they'll read a headline and like, oh, that's true. Is it? Right? Is it that simple? Is it more complex? Is there alternatives? Does the media want you to think one thing on purpose? Is there intentions? Like we got to critically think. And a good example
always
of this,
more complex, by the way.
Yeah. And even Venezuela, it's probably way more complex than just as simple as, fraud elections. It's probably way more complex. There's probably different world powers in play. I wouldn't be surprised that the CIA is involved to some extent. Like, who knows? I mean, the fact that we've been involved in almost every country in South America and their election process, what all of a sudden changed now, right? Mm-hmm. Like, look at human behavior. The idea that most people will practice unrighteous dominion. I think that's a truth, a principle that is transcended. And we need to critically think. And the boxer in the Olympics is a good example of this, man. Like I fell exactly into what I'm exactly talking about right now. Is I saw a headline of, I think the headline was boxer with XY chromosome, or boxer who failed gender test at world championship beats woman in Olympics, right? Mm-hmm. What do I jump to? Immediately, right? This is a trans dude in the Olympics, and unfair, beating up this woman. And typically and of course that's my bias, right? I'm against, and I don't even know if it's, I don't even know my language. Is it transgender male or female? I don't even know. I'm against transgenders in competing in certain sports. I think it's an unfair advantage. So based upon that context, when I had read that headline, what did I jump to? Immediately, dude, this is some dude beating up girls.
That's evil. That's absolutely.
Yeah. And then come to find out, and we were talking about this earlier, person was born a girl. It's actually not a gender. It's not a man. It's actually a girl, but has some genetic XY chromosome things going on mm-hmm. that kind of makes this a lot more difficult, right? To have a conversation or an opinion about.
And ultra rare too. Ultra rare condition.
Totally.
Okay. What you were talking about, where's that line? How do you draw it?
Then you start getting
testosterone
into doping and like, dude, this isn't so simple, right? And it starts getting a little bit more complicated. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You were saying I interrupted you.
No, that was it. It does become a doping issue as well. And it's like, okay, if they need that to function normally, they need testosterone as a woman. But then how do you justify that and say, well, it's okay for her to take testosterone, but it's not okay for any other athlete to do it because, they can't be on steroids. So again, where's that line drawn? And much more complicated than and either way, people could be up in arms about it. Maybe they should be. It is the Olympics. Maybe it does need to be a little cleaner and more straightforward if people are competing and it's supposed to be fair. But just like in anything competitive, is and always will be somebody trying to fudge the system someone trying to get around it, someone
Yeah.
coming up with their story or backstory or whatever it is to give them an edge or an advantage. And honestly, I don't think any of us could know their intention or what it is or whatever. And, but the media did what it does and
Makes it
got
polarizing.
people
Yeah.
against each other. And again, I think we just, at the end of the day, how does this affect me? How does it affect my family? What can I know about it? How much time should I give it? Because we probably have way bigger fish to fry in our own homes.
Yep. Totally. That's a good point. That's a good way to wrap it up. All right, man. Let's get into some questions from our brothers in the Iron Council. All right, Jimmy Hellwood, navigating a partner with an explosive temper. Explosive temper.
I saw this one and immediately, and I don't want to sound like I'm picking on him, but my immediate thought was that didn't just come out of nowhere. That explosive temper did not just show up. So if that's your partner that you've chosen, you knew that. And maybe that was exciting to you when you started the relationship. Maybe that fire, that spiciness was something that you liked and that was attractive and that turned you on a little bit. And now as you're deeper into the relationship, you're realizing, there's with that fire, things get burned. And you're starting to feel that burn a little bit more than you did in the beginning when it was exciting. And so for me, I just think at the beginning of this relationship, at the beginning of this partnership, did you assess if that was a deal breaker, if that was okay, or if it wasn't? Yeah. And did you navigate how you were going to show up if that was something that you were going to accept as part of their personality? Or did you think you could change them? And I think most likely it's the latter, but again, without enough information to understand it, that's just where I tend to head, is that this is not a new thing. And how long has it been a thing? And what have been your conversations to either help them deal better with those stresses, with those reactions, and or what are you doing to deal better with it when it happens?
Yeah, that's what I was leaning towards is, how's this? One thing's for sure, you're not going to be able to deal with anything difficult. It's starting to become the theme of this call, right? Get your house in order mentally. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to be able to deal with an explosive temper if you're reactionary to it. If you're flying off the cuff and you're angry about it, because now you're operating from a place of emotion and not logic either. Yeah. So make sure, one, that you're in a position where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, she's upset. Now I can have boundaries. Now I can have a conversation and keep my cool, right? And not being triggered by the explosive temper. So that's number one. Anyway, because if your mindset's not right, everything else is just this is all gonna go to crap real quick in a handbasket. If you're not managing your own emotions. Now, let's assume, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say now, I think there maybe is an exception, and that exception is I don't know how old he is or how old she is, but if she's in the range of menopause or perimenopause, that could be an issue as well, where it did come out of nowhere, and now she's kind of losing her mind. But again, yeah. The conversations about perimenopause, because a lot of times it's happening to women and they don't understand it, and they maybe tie it to other health-related issues in their lives or trying to figure it out, navigate it. And it's just as scary and confusing and frustrating for them as it is for you. And so depending on their age, maybe that's a discussion that you have, and not in the moment when they're heated, but in between of, hey, have you thought about this? And maybe we start investigating, some ways to help with a hormonal imbalance or whatever it may be there, which is it's an uncomfortable conversation. But again, depending on the age, maybe that's a possibility.
Well, and that's number two, right? So I think number one, you need to get your mindset right, your mindset, regardless of them. Number two, understand the issue. Where is the explosive temper coming from? What's the thought process? Have some empathy, critically think. What's the reasoning for it? Whatever. Is it physical, right? Is it mental? Is it something that you're doing or whatever, right? And so you need to understand the gap. And then number three is having a conversation around it. And I would be very careful how you approach this, right? It's like, this isn't a scenario by which you come to the table and you're like, hey, you need to change or, right? Like, don't threaten, don't create uncertainty, approach it from a caring mindset that like, hey, do you like to have an explosive temper and lose your temper? I'm assuming you don't. No, I don't. I don't like it when I feel this way. I agree. And not really ideal for us as a couple. What can we do? How can I support you? What triggers this? What adjustments can I make to support you in it? Right? We all have struggles. I get it. Totally understand. But I want you to be happy. And I want you to be in a great mindset. And so let's work on it together as a couple. But you're not going to be able to do that well without the mindset first. Have some empathy, because if you're not understanding where it's coming from, then everything else is just going to be probably poor implemented tactics. And then implement, right, a strategy moving forward from the perspective of support, not from the perspective of change.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
All right, Joshua Collins, he jokes, he's joking around about some stuff here. All right. If there was a singular advice you could give men today, what would it be?
Man, these are the worst questions. A singular
advice.
That's the one secret.
Maybe what's one thing on your mind? Maybe it doesn't have to be the one thing, but what's something that's present for you of late, Sean?
If I were to give one thing, it would be to keep growing. If I was going to give any advice to a man, it's to keep growing. It's to keep improving, keep being better. I think we get trapped in this. One of my favorite quotes has always been Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, most men die at the age of 25. We just don't get around to burying them until they're 65. And what he meant by that is most men stop dreaming. They stop growing. They stop improving. And honestly, I don't think it happens in their 20s. I think it happens in their teens. When you get into high school, middle school, younger kids think they can do anything. They can conquer the world. They can be an astronaut. They can be the president. They can be a scientist. They could be whatever. And then you get into school and people start telling you, well, that's unrealistic. That's hard. That's not, maybe you don't have the grades for that. And they start planting these seeds of doubt, and then people start settling. And then they just say, well, that doesn't happen to people like us. That doesn't happen to people with our backgrounds. That doesn't happen. They start accepting these things that they're being told that are false, but they're just accepting that, okay, well, I guess why continue to try to be better if it doesn't matter anyways? And so my advice would be, don't accept any of that crap. If there's something that you want to try or do or push towards, hey, get on the train that's going to at least get you in the vicinity. Start reading good books, listening to podcasts, surrounding yourself with people that have those things, that do those things, changing your environment, cutting out negatives. I mean, there's just, the list goes on and on and on, but all of it's connected to growth mindset. Just don't settle. Don't stop. Another one of my favorite quotes is from Lou Holtz. He said, if you're not growing, you're dying. So keep growing.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'd lean in the same vein. The advice I would get, and it's not advice, it's really just an ask, is just get present to your impact. I mean, the reality of it is a lot of the difficulties and struggles we experience, that your kids will experience, that your family will experience, you can make a difference. And I think we play small. I think way too many men play small. They're if you want to use a visual analogy, they're on the court watching the game, but they're in the stands watching the game. They're not on the court playing.
I agree.
And it's unfortunate. And I think we need to get present to the impact of that you have on people. And by the way, I think some impact you won't ever get credit for. I realized that over the last year. And it's almost a compliment. It hurts the ego a little bit. Maybe it keeps me humble. But I think sometimes the impact, people won't give you credit for it. But you're making a difference. And we need to get present to it. And then use that to ensure that we're living a life worth living. All right, Brandon has a tough question here, a little bit lengthy. There's kind of two parts to this, so I'll read off the first part. So Brandon Clement, military guy, if you had to only do one cycle of chemo and it reduced your chances of relapse by 3 to 10% in 2 years versus a 20 to 50% with just monitoring with a 40% chance of cardiovascular disease, or change to a radically healthy diet and lifestyle change without side effects and monitor the cancer could potentially come back, but not necessarily. If relapse occurs, more cycles of chemo would have to be administered. Which would you choose? I believe in God and I want to test my faith, but I also want to discern wisdom. And he has another part of the question, but I'll let you answer that part first.
I had a couple thoughts, and I saw this one too. And so the first thing that I don't understand, not have ever being in the military and understanding how that works with the VA when you have certain issues and how it affects your pension down the road if you do or don't take recommendations for your health and continuing to get your benefits. I don't know if it affects that in any way.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of your action that you take should consider that in your decision. And then with that, I think it's not as straightforward as, which one sounds better. I think you need to have a conversation with your wife, if you have kids even. I mean, there's so many more questions that I would have in helping you navigate this. But now in line with that, if I'm just looking at the chemo or monitoring or lifestyle change, it sounds like it's kind of stage one because you have these different options. Yeah. Personally, I would go with more of a holistic approach and go with the lifestyle change, the extra work. It's some people would probably say chemo and lifestyle change. That's actually my tendency, is to be like, bang it all out. Lifestyle change, chemo, just attack it.
Do it all. Yeah.
Honestly, I tend more towards lifestyle change, do that. In the meantime, researching some different holistic options that may help subside it, and then go from there. Having dealt with this with my mom, and I went through that with her, and we weighed the options and then ultimately left it up to here. And so what I'll finish with, and this probably isn't any help to him, but what I will say is at the end of the day, he has to make the decision, and he has to accept that for himself and for the people in his life as his decision. So don't. Earlier, we were talking about looking for someone to save you and looking for someone to give you that advice, whatever it is. Maybe you're looking for your wife to tell you what she wants you to do. And a lot of times people do that because then they say, well, if it doesn't work, then I have somebody to blame. Just
Don't
know
put
at the
that
end of
on
the
her.
day, make
Yeah.
this your decision for your sake and for everyone else around you. Because if it doesn't work, you don't want any of them to have the thought of, man, I should have pushed him more. I should have made him do this. I should have, been a little louder and all of that. And so just make sure that it's clear that after it's all said and done, the decision is yours, and everyone that's affected by that decision has to accept that, including yourself.
Yeah. Don't put that on her. That'd be unfair. And this is tough when it's really easy to have that opinion sometimes until you're faced with these kind of hard decisions.
Not just really tough. I think it's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
So first off, Brandon, I feel you, man, super difficult circumstance, and hopefully you find confidence and peace in the direction that you go, and that things go well. My thoughts on this are really rooted in what my wife did. So Asia ended up with melanoma on her back, ended up cutting a massive chunk out of her back. It actually spread to her lymph nodes. This was all earlier this year. And so she was stage 3, almost stage 4. And same thing, right? We go in and we had the same exact conversation. They checked her lymph nodes, it spread to her lymph nodes. The doctor recommended therapy. And we're like, give us the breakdown. And they're like, well, therapy is great. It reduces your chances. Almost the same here. I think 5 to 7% reduction of it coming back. What are the side effects? It could affect your organs, all these other things. And here's the part that really resonated with me. We were talking about, I brought it up to the doctor, and he was great. He gave us all the raw numbers for us to consider for ourselves. You could tell what his opinion was. In this example. I said, so we asked him, we're like, hey, how about dietary adjustments? What we're doing on a day-to-day that would reduce our chances and of it coming back and everything else. And his response was, well, you don't want to disrupt your life and not have ice cream and sugar and stuff. You want to live a good life too. He thought, literally talking to my wife and I, that us eliminating sugar from our diets would be a stupid idea almost, and it would just be too much to ask of anybody. And I'm like, you're crazy, right? The fact that he wasn't almost promoting that over just taking treatment, I'm like, I was blown. And so absolutely, I lean in the direction of lifestyle change.
Well, let me ask you this, Kip. Did you get a second opinion then? Did you? What was your?
Yeah, not just a second opinion. Asia and I just went hog town, right?
Understanding into other options.
Yes,
good.
And just
that's
looking
what
over anything and everything, and come to find out, we're like, it's not worth the risk. The treatment is not worth the risk of the potential side effects. And you know what? We should probably adjusting our lifestyle and our diets anyway, because that stuff's crap for our bodies. And let's give your body the fighting chance to do its job really, really well by being more healthy. And she still goes into scans, I think, every 3 to 6 months. And those are stressful because we're not you're just waiting for something to show up. And we'll continue down that path. And so that's where we're leaning, is more in that area. But I think most importantly, anything, obviously, don't rely on Sean and I in regards to how you handle your cancer. We're not experts. But I think it goes back to the believing in yourself, what's best for your body versus what's easy, getting second opinions, and then you owning it. I think what you said, Sean, I think is spot on. Don't outsource this to anybody else, not even your doctor. If you don't feel good about it, then don't do it. Like, follow you come to the conclusion, don't outsource it to your wife or your doctor or anyone else. By the way, interesting note, when Asia went to the dermatologist, when she was bothered about an area on her back, guess what the dermatologist said about the spot that ended up having melanoma? It's fine.
Oh, wow.
She says, oh, no, it's fine.
Hmm.
And Asia went, no, I don't like it. It bothers me. She made that call. It bothers me. I don't like it. Take it out anyway. Test it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
She listened to herself. So listen to your body.
Yeah.
Gain some necessary knowledge, make some adjustments. Now, I do want to call this one part out. And Sean, I'm assuming you'll have an opinion about this. I believe in God and I want to test my faith, but I also want to discern wisdom. Any additional thoughts that you would add to our response based upon that statement?
Yeah. I mean, it's, we've all heard the story of the guy in the flood, right? And God sends him a rowboat, a tugboat, a helicopter, and the guy ends up drowning in his house because he's waiting for God to save him. And then he gets to the pearly gates and he's like, God, why didn't you save me? And he's like, I sent you a rowboat, a tugboat, and a helicopter. Like, you have the resources around you to do research. Again, to trust your gut, to have those conversations, and simultaneously pray for that spirit to help guide you in those decisions. And when you feel it in your gut, it's whatever's going to feel right. I don't think, regardless, whatever your decision is, that you could ever be 100% certain in that decision, but you will know what feels better and go with that and trust it. And, the rest is up to God.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. Bobby Wright. How to navigate watching your father's body fall apart and deal with not being able to do what he loves, yard work, gardening, and etc.
Yeah, I saw this one too. And it's not enough information for why, but the only thing I can attach it to is when my mom got her cancer in her face. That was the same thing. Her favorite thing to do is go out and be with people and to laugh and to, but she literally looked like those zombie movies when they shoot a zombie in the face and like half the face is, like rotting flesh, like ripped off. That's what her face looked like. So she had to walk around. Happened to be during COVID. So she would walk around with a mask and at least have that, and people couldn't tell as much, but she knew
but
it
it stopped her. It stopped her ability. She didn't want to go out and see people because of
yeah. And then she couldn't talk physically. She could, all of those things. So like the reason for existence and being around people and being happy and laughing and those things was gone. And that was really difficult. And so the next best thing I could do is really whatever I could do to help support her and make her feel a little bit better. But I couldn't make the cancer go away. I couldn't make that difficulty go away. All I could be was around a little bit more to try and make her laugh, but at least make her happier, her knowing she was loved and being supported and that we were doing what we could. But honestly, that's their own battle to fight. And all you can do is and have those conversations. I would ask her, hey, do you want me around a little bit more? Do you want me, I ended up putting her in a beach house just because we had the capacity to be able to do that. And so her favorite place to be on the planet was this specific strip of beach in California near where we lived and grew up. And I got her into a couple different beach houses on that strip, it paid for all of it for almost a year. And she loved that, because if she was going to be miserable, at least she could, watch the sunsets in the most beautiful place, in her opinion, on the planet. that she
Yeah.
loved. And so that helped a little bit, and at the end of the day, I can feel good about that. And then visiting her as much as I could and being around and supporting her and taking her to all of her things she had to be at the hospital and through her treatments and all of that. So I think, that combined with having all the conversations now, if you're watching his body deteriorate, I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's just physical, if it's mental, but be willing to have the uncomfortable conversations now. If there's things to get off your chest, things you always wanted to tell him and never did, just do it now because it's only going to get harder.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you'll regret it.
Yeah. I mean, my dad went from his cognitive decline was like 2 weeks.
That's so crazy.
It was just super fast. So yeah, don't wait and hope, like we were saying earlier. One thing that comes to mind here on this question for Bobby is, what does your father want? Like, if I'm going to go through hardship, the number one thing I'd want is for my kids to learn from it. For them to be better off because of it. That way it's not in vain. So your dad dealing with this difficult part of his life, don't let it be a waste. So you ask, how do I navigate? You learn. You look at it and you go, man, this is life. It's going to end. We all die. And sometimes our exit is not going to be perfect. Our exit is going to be dirty. It's going to be messy. It's going to be abrupt. It might be long, drawn out. Like, our exits all look different. And so I would ask you, Bobby, what can you learn from this experience? And how do you become a better man for having to deal with it? And that's how you make sure that your dad's struggle here is not being wasted. There's a lot that you could really get present to. And this could be highly, in my opinion, could be highly transformative to you as an individual by helping your dad navigate this part of his life. Absolutely. No doubt in my mind. Hard, but wonderful opportunity to grow.
I love that.
Todd Martinez. How does a sovereign man navigate the election season? I know enough to stay out of arguments that go nowhere. However, I also believe keeping a silent majority is how we've gotten so far off of our values here in the US. When not to speak up.
Or when and when not to. So
yeah, when and when not to. I read that wrong. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's, for me, always comes down to less talking and more doing, no matter what. And so, yeah, we're coming into an election cycle, but with that, we're also, like, we just had a local election here last week. And so are you voting in your local elections, in your community elections, for your school board, for your local council? Are you in tune with who's more in alignment with your values? Because as frustrating as everything is, you're honestly going to be more affected at the local level. And then you do your part. You get out and vote. And now, as far as those conversations, they get a little heavier and more heated in an election time because of what the media does and the commercials you're going to see and all of the stuff that gets people riled up. But don't leave those conversations to just now. So be willing to, for the next 3.5 years after the election, to continue having those conversations. But then also, how are you showing up in your community? How are you showing up in your family? How are you showing up in your environment that you're in your workplace, whatever it is, wherever these conversations are being had? And back to what we were talking about earlier, if I was to give any one singular advice to someone, is to keep growing. And if you're that guy, and if you're committed to growth and helping others and serving and being the best version of yourself, people are going to take notice of that in whatever the capacity is. And so if you are somebody that they respect and that they look up to and that they see as putting in the work and not just talking. And I think that's the challenge, is too many people just talk about these things. But if you're out there actually doing it, being better, serving people, serving the community, serving the people within your environment, you're being a good father, a good husband, a good brother, sister, coworker, whatever it is, then when you do speak to whatever it is, it holds a little more validity with the people that you're around. And so I think that's more important than the conversations themselves, is how we're showing up in our environments, so that when we have the conversations, it doesn't become just an argument. People actually have a little more respect, maybe a little more empathy, maybe a little more willing to listen because of who you are.
Yeah. Are you in a position of influence? And running your mouth is not influence, just noise. You know, it's interesting. I agree with, I used to agree. I'm challenging my own thought, actually, as I read this. Because you wrote, I believing in keeping to the silent majority is how we've gotten so far off our values, is the silent majority. I actually wonder if that's true, actually, now that I think about it. Because this implies that the change in our value system as a country is just a result of people speaking out and not speaking out. And I actually wonder that that's not really what transforms my value system, is popularity. What's most common? Or was it how I was raised? Right? And so I wonder if we've gotten off our values, per se, if we want to use that term, by how we were raised this past generation. And it's more around the generations and their homes and how people were raised, and we're now seeing the result of it, than it is really, oh, well, there's less Facebook posts around this, and that's why the silent majority, you know what I mean, is losing out because they don't post on social media as much around and speak out about. It's like, well, is that really, that's called popularity. I don't know if that's rooted in our value system. I think our values is in the home. And I think that, I don't know if I agree, actually. I used to, but I'm just now challenging my thought around this, that still, I think the greatest opportunity here is not to be louder. It's just to make sure that our homes are in order, and that we're raising kids that have a growth mindset, that we're raising kids that critically think, that our influence in our neighborhoods is from a position of influence and positiveness. And that's really that's really where the change is. It's not people speaking out or against. I think that's just, I don't know, that seems a lot like just tumbleweeds, blowing tumbleweeds around. If we're really focused on how our silence or how loud we are about something. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I think that's perfect. I've heard the quote a bunch of times. I don't know where it comes from, but I can't hear a word you're saying because what you do speaks so loudly.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's the most important part of everything we're talking about is, just show up, be somebody that, if you're somebody of influence that demands respect because of how you serve the people around you, that's going to carry into all your conversations, regardless of the topic.
Well, and it goes back something that Jordan Peterson, or at least I've snagged from him, is like the importance of like getting your own house in order. Because the reality of it is most of us will navigate this election season getting fired up. Oh, I'm fired up for my candidate, and I'm going to do something about it. Meanwhile, my relationship with my kids sucks. My relationship with my wife is mediocre. My job is miserable. I'm a victim in the office. The people I work with can't stand me because I'm negative all the time. And then you have an opinion that you need to rise up and care about who gets elected? dude, get your own shit in order first. You're in zero position to influence anybody of anything because you're still working on you.
And even
How's your body? How's your health? How's your spirituality? Oh, not checked, not checked. Maybe do that first. And not just do that first because it's undeserving. You're not ready. You're not ready to have greater impact if you're still addressing the impact of yourself. The best testing ground and area of growth for you, if you really want to make a difference in the world, is getting yourself in order. That is how you learn how to do that for other people. And if you're still struggling in that place, I honestly do believe this. It's not that like your opinions aren't as valuable. They just won't be as impactful. And the lesson for you is in the gym still, is in getting your health in order still, is in resolving your relationship with your parents still. And to be frank, those are the higher priorities in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Those areas of our lives are the areas of the greatest impact.
Or they should be.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. You're going to say something, Sean.
No, that was it. You nailed it.
All right. Peter Morrison, are you good on time? A couple more questions.
Yeah, this will be the last one, and then I got to jump.
Okay. Well, let me pick a good last one then.
There's got to be a jiu-jitsu one in there somewhere.
There is a one, but that's a low hanging, like we could answer that in 1 minute. Okay. That's tough. I think legacy aligns. We can pass this other question on moving forward. So Peter Morrison, let's talk about legacy. When attempting something very difficult with regard to legacy, what are your top 3 priorities to address?
First one is what I'm doing now affecting that legacy? And then the next question is how? Is it positive or negative? And then, the first question before those two is, what do I want in the first place? So, if I were going to pick a top 3, it's knowing what you want that to look like, the actions necessary to get there. And then every day, am I moving the needle closer to that destination or further from it? And that comes back to the growth mindset we were talking about, and the accountability in those things. And too many people are just drifting in their life and hoping that the current is going to take them to their destination. And it just doesn't work that way. So we have to be more intuitive, and we have to be more intentional. Oh my gosh. Just be intentional in where you want to go. And the rest will line up with that. Because if you know it, you understand it, and you're speaking it on a daily basis. That's why the battle planner is so important. That one of my favorite books, Think and Grow Rich, is writing down what you want, reading it out loud a couple times a day, speaking what sacrifices you're going to make, what you're going to give in return. And, and then the rest will, then you just need time.
Yeah.
And over time, as long as you're getting better, that 1% better every day, it doesn't even have to be 1%. It could be 0.01%. But as long as it's a little better every day, you look back at the end of your life and know you built something substantial, something you could be proud of, something that continued to grow, to expand, to make impact, and that you didn't just drift.
Yeah. I love it, man. A failure that I have, and so I'm projecting on everybody listening, is I believe in the 8th day of the week called Someday. And I think in the Iron Council, we do this sometimes. And by the way, to learn about the Iron Council, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. But we get new guys in the Iron Council, and they will write these visions and in the spirit of legacy, right? And it's all future tense. It's all someday. It's all after I get this, and we'll even do this in goal setting, right? We'll go, well, I'm going to complete a marathon. Why? Oh, because when I do, then that means this. Or when I get a 6-pack of abs, oh, why do I care about that? Oh, because if I had a 6-pack, then that means this. And we're all delaying it.
Yeah.
To someday. And so my only challenge and recommendation would be don't wait. I think so much of the impact and the opportunities that we have in life is in the state of being. How are you showing up today? Are you an amazing dad today? Are you loving your kids today? Are you resolving those relationships that need to be resolved or completed or fixed today? Not someday, not after this, not I'm going to be happy when no, today. Like be it today. Don't delay. Otherwise, a lot, and at least for me, I'll end up chasing, and then when I get there, it's not enough. And then and it's the next thing, it's not enough. It's like when I first started working a real job. I remember I went to college. I'm a son of a dairy farmer. I remember going to college thinking if I can make 40K a year, I'd be successful. And I remember when I made 40 and I thought, no, that's not enough. And then it was 60 and that's not enough, and 80 and that's not enough. And then I realized it had nothing to do with the money.
Yep.
And so be careful your definition of legacy and don't delay it too long. It would be my recommendation.
Love it.
Cool, brother. All right. Couple of call to actions. I mean, we talked about the Iron Council. You know where to join us. Join us online. Connect with Sean and I on the gram, and Mr. Mickler on X and Instagram at Ryan Mickler. And the last thing, Ryan's out. I didn't even explain that. So he's out. He's doing a hunt in Africa with M42 Adventures to connect with the things that they do there. That's M42adventures.com. And then starting on October 1st, a big call to action is a program that Ryan's putting together called divorcenotdeath.com. So divorcenotdeath.com. And it's really navigating post-divorce. And I think it's in line with the spirit of kind of what we're talking about is just get prepared, right? If you're struggling with something, address it. If things are unresolved, address them. If you're not sovereign financially, get that way, right? Like take some action and get buttoned up. Sean, any closing marks?
No, I love it. You just gave so many resources for people to move the needle like I was talking about. And the only thing that's going to stop you is not taking advantage of any of it.
Yeah. So take advantage of that. And until Friday field notes, take action and become the men that you were meant to be.